Yo, what's going on, guys? So I will be living and traveling around Europe for the next year to year plus. And instead of traveling it the typical way of taking planes, trains, and buses and stuff like that, I went on and decided to buy a new car, which you can see behind me. So just wanted to give you guys a breakdown on kind of how I made this happen, just in case you guys are coming to Europe for an extended period of time as well. So the idea of buying the car actually started when I was in the process of leaving Tulum and heading down to Australia. And since I knew I was going to be in Australia for an extended period of time, and I know that Australia pretty much is pretty spread out to where you really need a car in order to travel around, I decided to start looking into like long-term rental cars. And what I was finding was pretty expensive, but luckily I got this ad for this luxury car rental company for this Range Rover Sport that you actually see in this video now. And it was a pretty good deal. Ended up paying just a little bit more than what I would have paid if I got just a regular SUV. So that was cool and all, but it still was a pretty penny. And then after Australia, before I was heading back to the other side of the world, I was planning on also stopping off in New Zealand for at least 10 days. So luckily it wasn't as long as Australia, so it wasn't going to cost as much, but still a good amount of time to rent a car for. So did the same process, did some research into the renting cars in New Zealand, and I ended up getting this Defender that you see here in the video. Love this car. Actually, just to give you a breakdown, I prefer the Defender over the Range Rover any day. A little more rugged, a little more fun to drive. With that being said, after renting both cars, or after seeing the cost of what it was going to take to rent both cars in Australia and New Zealand, and I knew that I was planning on going to Europe after this and spending at least a year plus there, and I still wanted to have the same flexibility and freedom to be able to get around, see and experience a lot of things that you can't do if you're just taking trains and planes and stuff like that. So I pretty much put pen to paper and decided that buying a car could be an option. It could be potentially a better deal than renting cars all the time or taking public transportation or stuff like that. I feel like it's going to limit me on the amount of things that I would be able to do and see. With that, I went full on with it, guys. I hopped on ChatGPT to figure out where do people in Europe usually look for cars, and from there, guys, I got started. So with that, guys, I had no idea on what car I was going to get. I didn't know what country I was going to buy it in, so I was honestly going in blind. The only criteria I had at the beginning was an SUV, so I simply went online, set it to SUV in Europe, and started to search. But I started to think to myself, like, gas is extremely expensive in Europe, so maybe I should look into EVs. And that's what led me to the Porsche Taycan. And I've honestly always been a big fan of the Porsche Panamera, and the Taycan is pretty much the EV version of the Panamera. So honestly, loved it. Started doing some heavy research into the Porsche Taycan, reading all the reviews I could find, all the forums, just digging in deeply to make sure this was going to be the exact car that I wanted for the year plus long trip in Europe. And after some thorough research, it was. So from there, I was able to narrow down my search to strictly the Porsche Taycan. And with that, I knew Germany was going to be probably the best bet. Obviously, Porsche is a German brand. They had the most supply, they would have the most experience in exporting the car. Started reaching out to some German dealers. The one who had this exact car said it would be no problem at all to do the export. All they needed was a small fee. And from there, he asked me, like, when did I want to come see the car? But at the time, I was actually in Australia still, but luckily Sylvia was in Poland, so she was able to hop over to Germany, me on video call, showed me the car. I absolutely loved it. So after some quick negotiations and them agreeing to hold the car for me for 2 months if I just put down a deposit. And so from there, the deal was pretty much set. So I had 2 months to get everything together. But other than that, things were pretty smooth, guys. And honestly, the only thing that was really messing with me at the time was the fact that the dollar was down 10% year to date against the euro. So that was a pretty large pill to swallow. And a few days leading up to finally sending the rest of the money, the dollar was extremely volatile to where like the price of the car was honestly changing significantly just depending on what day I would send the remaining balance. But the day before our 32-hour journey to Poland, I went on and sent the money and everything was pretty much set. Once we got to Poland, we were heading to Germany the very next day. So on that train ride to Germany, I really started to think about all the moving parts that had to pretty much be in sync for this to happen. The finding the car, finding the country that I would buy it from, finding the right dealer who would be able to export the car for me, exchanging the money, transferring the money, timing the flights, timing the train rides, just all the things that had to pretty much be in sync went fairly smoothly. So I was just honestly waiting for us to arrive at the dealer and there being something wrong or just something like that. But overall I was extremely happy that things went fairly smoothly. But once we arrived to the dealer, the car was covered up. We did like a little ceremony, a little toast. They uncovered the car and there it was, guys, a 4S Cross Turismo Porsche Taycan, bought in Germany, now all mine. I'm sure you guys are also wondering why I went with an EV versus a gas car, especially for travel. So like I mentioned previously, it started out originally because gas is extremely high here in Europe. But to be honest, electricity is high here as well. But I still do think it's cheaper than gas. But I do love this car so much, I probably would have got it if it was gas as well. But initially, that was the thought process of going with the EV, is it would be a little bit cheaper to travel around than with gas. But overall, we've had no problems at all. There's a ton of chargers around Europe. And then when we're on the road, we can charge the car at hotels. So it's honestly been more convenient than a gas car in some cases because we can charge at hotels. We're at a pit stop to charge the whip. Guys, check this view out. So we got the boy, we're charging it. Gorgeous Croatian views. What a beautiful place, absolutely beautiful place. Yeah, benefits of having the EV, you get to stop and enjoy the scenery. So look at this, we got a nice church in the background. It's such a beautiful place. Actually, the city we're in is called Osmos. It's like 30 minutes outside of Split, the city. Yeah, man, amazing views. Amazing views. I know I've only been talking about the positives so far, so what are some of the negatives with buying this car in Europe? And the first one would be VAT. So if you guys didn't know, Europe taxes their citizens tremendously when it comes to buying things like cars. So just to give you some perspective, if I were to buy this car in Texas, I would pay a 6.25% tax rate. Whereas in Germany, which has one of the lower tax rates, it was 19%. And in the other countries that I was looking at potentially buying this car in, which were the Netherlands and Belgium, they both charge a 21% tax rate, and in Poland it is 23% tax rate. So as you can see, this car is literally cheaper to buy a Porsche in the US than it is to buy in Germany, which is pretty mind-blowing since Porsche is a German brand. But I've always heard this in the past, that it's cheaper to buy German cars in the US than in Germany. But from first-hand experience, I can tell you guys that is indeed true. It is cheaper to buy a Porsche. Specifically, it's cheaper to buy this model in the US than in Germany. Maybe there's some situations where it's cheaper to buy a Porsche in Germany than the US, but from my experience, it is much cheaper to buy it in the US than in Germany. There are some ways to get around paying VAT in Europe. So for example, if you have a business that is incorporated in Europe, you can buy the car with your business and therefore you don't have to pay VAT. But if you're just a normal Joe like myself, you have to pay VAT. So that has been the biggest annoyance, was the amount of taxes I paid on this car, and knowing that it would be cheaper to buy it in the US than in Europe. And secondly is, I don't know if you guys noticed, but this car is an absolute tank. It is huge, it is wide, it is long, it is heavy. And in Europe, their parking spots, honestly guys, I feel like they're meant for little toy cars. They're extremely small. So it's been a big hassle trying to park this car at both of my Airbnb. So in Croatia, I pretty much had to take up 2 parking spots in order to park the car. And here in Montenegro, I have to like wiggle it in some random way to get it to fit. And it takes me like 15 minutes to pull out. So that has been the biggest annoyance with having such a big car in Europe, is the parking spots are pretty small. The roads can be tight. So that's been a hassle. Those have been the 2 biggest annoyances, is first the taxes, and secondly that having a big car in Europe can be a struggle at times. So 3 months in of having this car, what is my thoughts? And to be honest guys, this has been the best decision I have ever made while traveling. It has completely changed the game. It has allowed me to see many places that I never would have seen if I didn't have a car. So I have been extremely excited about this decision. And if I ever had to do it again, I definitely would, like without a doubt. So I'm extremely happy with this car. I absolutely love the car. I love just having the freedom, the flexibility of seeing many places. Extremely excited about the months ahead and very happy with the decision. But other than that guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Till next time, y'all take care.